This beer, Murgy Straight, is a fantastic example of a modern British golden ale by Four Priest Brewery, and in this video I'm going to be brewing my own version of it. So let's do it. So if you already follow the channel, you'll have seen me interview Andy from Four Priest Brewery and discuss this beer at length. I'll put a link to that video up on the top of the screen now. But if you are new here, please hit the subscribe button and like the video so that you can see new content when it comes out. And you can also follow my other socials and support the channel in other ways by checking out the links in the description. Anyway, Andy being such an awesome dude, he's already shared the recipe for this beer on his own channel and also on Brewfather. There's links for both of those if you go down into the description for this video. You can also now buy the beer direct from his website, which is something I would strongly recommend to you if you want to get a good beer to drink, but especially if you are planning on brewing this recipe so you can get an idea of what the beer is all about and also maybe compare your efforts to the real deal at the end, which is something I'm going to do on this video. Speaking of which, let's quickly go over that recipe now. At the beginning of the video, I described this as a modern British golden ale. The reason for that is because of the choice of hops in the recipe, but also the balance of this beer, which definitely leans a little bit towards an American pale as far as the hop presence, as well as the actual choice of varieties in this beer. That said, it still retains the lower ABV and the high drinkability of a traditional golden ale, and it's definitely a really good candidate for putting on a beer engine for serving as well, which we'll see a little bit later. So, starting with the main stats for the recipe, we have a beer that is on the recipe coming in at 4.3%. I think this particular batch is 4.2%, but obviously in that kind of region. The recipe is for a 23-litre batch, and we're working from 72% brew house efficiency on this recipe. The original gravity is targeted at 1039, and we're looking for a final gravity of 1006 in order to hit that ABV. So a pretty dry finish. Again, not a massively high original gravity, and we're definitely in that sort of session strength, cask kind of session beer territory as far as the strength and gravity goes. EBC, we're looking at 7.1, so very light in colour as well. IBUs at 30 to give a Bugu ratio of 0.78, so a fairly firm level of bitterness in the beer too. Looking at the grain bill for this one, we've got 2.97 kilograms of Clear Choice Extra Pale from Crisp. Then we've got 620 grams of Maris Otter. I think in the previous video, Andy talked about using that little bit of extra base malt just to try and add an extra layer of kind of malty flavour and depth to the beer. We've also got some wheat malt in there, so we've got 330 grams of wheat malt, which equates to about 8% of the grist. And then finally 120 grams of caramel, which is a fairly low colour caramel malt, and that's about 3% of the grist. So just going to add a little bit of colour with that and perhaps a little bit of sweetness to it as well. With this beer, you're going to be mashing for 60 minutes at 66 degrees C, which again is going to help contribute to that fairly low finishing gravity. We're using US-05, so you can also expect to see a pretty high level of attenuation from that yeast, especially when you are mashing at the lower end. So according to the recipe, you're likely to hit around about 84% attenuation if the US-05 performs to spec. So far, there's nothing there that really sets it apart from a pretty standard kind of golden ale recipe, but then we get into the hops, which makes it a little bit more interesting. I'm going to round the numbers up on these because there's lots of decimal points, because this is a recipe that's been scaled down from the commercial batch size that Andy does normally. So I'll just round these up or down to the closest gram. The two hops in this are Talus and Citra, which are a great combo. They work really nicely together. Everyone kind of knows about Citra. Talus is a newer hop. It's one of the Neo-Mexicanus varieties. There are a lot of citrus and fruity flavours from it, but you can also get quite a bit of kind of slightly spicy, woody or herbal notes from it as well. It can change quite a lot depending on how you use it and which hops you combine it with, but yeah, it's a really nice hop. I do like it a lot myself, and have used it with Citra before as well. So anyway, looking at the hops, we don't have anything as a 60-minute boil edition. We just start from 20 minutes with 8 grams of Talus and 5 grams of Citra, giving us about 10 IBUs in total from that addition. At 10 minutes, we've got 13 grams of Talus and 8 grams of Citra. That's giving us about another 11 or 12 IBUs. And after that, it's a 30-minute hop stand or whirlpool. I think we're doing that at 78 degrees, according to this recipe. Very specific hop stand temperature there for that one. And you're looking at 32 grams of Talus and 15 grams of Citra in the whirlpool. That's going to bring an additional 8 or so IBUs. Then we've got the dry hops. Those are 39 grams of Citra, so we're kind of switching around the dominant hop for the dry hop to Citra rather than the Talus. 39 grams of the Citra and 27 grams of the Talus, and that's going in on day 5. So presumably while there's still a little bit of fermentation left to go, you're probably looking at the last few points, gravity points to drop by that point. And those will stay in until you're ready to transfer the beer, basically. Andy suggests fermenting this at 19 degrees C for 10 days, then dropping it to 4 degrees C for the remaining 4 days. Serving wise, he does recommend serving it from cask or beer engine at 11 degrees serving temperature. So that's the recipe. Like I said, you can go back and check the previous video for more details on that, and obviously get over to Andy's channel and look back through his back catalogues of videos, which are great and do include specific information to this beer and the kind of development of this recipe as well. Go straight to the horse's mouth, as it were, if you want more information on that, but obviously feel free to throw any questions that you have down in the comments. As I was saying before, I think you can see from the kind of hopping rate in this beer that it's a little bit higher than what you would see with traditional golden ales. So we are maybe getting a little bit more towards an American pale ale in terms of the whirlpool and sort of hopping, dry hopping methods that are being used here, but it's still relatively restrained. So we're looking at a total there of about 67 or 66 grams dry hop and about 45, just over 45 grams in the whirlpool. So that's still only a dry hop rate of just under 3 grams a litre. So it's not, anything too crazy or out there. Anyway, that's the recipe and the brewing. Let's get into tasting the beer. So there we have it, fresh off of the hand pull, and it looks really nice in the glass. We are quite a while into conditioning with this beer, so it has been in there for a good couple of months at least, I think now, and it's cleared down relatively nicely. There's a little bit of just a slight sort of haze on it, but it's mostly see-through now. It is much colder than the suggested temperature for serving at the moment. The keg that is feeding the beer engine is in the fridge next to me, and I can't really get that set cool enough, warm enough without it defrosting the freezer, because it's a fridge freezer unit. So yeah, at some point, as we're now into the cooler months, I'll probably take the keg just out of the fridge and just have it sat in the garage to sit at ambient temperatures. But other than that, nice frothy head on it, which seems to be sticking around quite nicely. Lovely straw colour to the beer, quite light still, definitely fits the golden ale kind of colour guidelines for this. And aroma on it is absolutely delicious. So it's got a really bright citrusy note there. There's some kind of pithy grapefruit. One of the flavours that Talus, well, some people get from Talus, and I've certainly got this in the past, is a kind of pink grapefruit vibe, and there's definitely a kind of like pink grapefruit note on there. It's not really overpowering like you might get in a like an American IPA or pale ale or something like that, but there's just a nice subtle kind of grapefruity citrus rind note there, but also some kind of herbal spicy kind of hop aromatics in there too. So I think the Talus does bring almost like a slightly kind of noble or, you know, maybe more kind of traditional English kind of hop character to some extent with those aromas and flavors. A little bit of sweet malt in the background there. Yeah, it's good. Let's get tasting it. So really nice light body to the beer, kind of crisp, actually quite a crisp kind of finish to it. The bitterness on this is fairly it's up there. It's not, I wouldn't, well, actually assertive is the wrong word. It's not kind of hitting you in the face with the bitterness, but there's definitely a nice bitter finish to it. So it's got a decent level of bitterness in there, and I think that really instantly makes you want to go back for another swig of it. There's some really nice light kind of tropical fruit flavour in there from the Citra. A little bit of that kind of sort of almost papaya kind of lychee sort of note that it sometimes gives. And again, then just a little bit more of that piffy kind of citrus peel, which I think in combination with the Talus is you're getting more of that. Just light, sweet malt in the background. Don't really pick out a huge amount of specific malt flavours from this, but it's just a nice sort of pale ale kind of malt base, which props up the hops really nicely. Extremely drinkable, lovely light body to it, fresh tasting hops, low carbonation because it's off the hand pull, which makes it even more drinkable. I'm not always a great fan of hoppy beers off of a beer engine, but this one works really, really well, and I can see why it's been such a great seller for Andy, because this is a really well put together and consistent recipe, clearly. Very happy with that. Strongly recommend you give this one a go if you want a sort of session strength kind of golden ale that's, you know, pushing the hop presence a little bit more into those kind of modern styles, if you will. Let's compare it to the real deal and see how we've done on that front. Okay, so in the glass, you can see there's quite a bit more carbonation on the canned version from Andy, which is not surprising, to be fair, because obviously this has been packaged in a different way. The colour is pretty close. I think there's a little bit of a darker colour on Andy's beer. To be honest, I didn't use the exact same malts as what was in the recipe because I didn't have those exact malts available. So there were some slight changes as far as the base malt went, but I did keep the numbers all the same, and it should have worked out roughly equivalent. But I think there's just a slightly deeper kind of gold colour on his beer, and Andy's beer does seem to be a little bit clearer as well. So there's a touch more haze on my one. This is not entirely gin clear, but it's definitely a little bit more so than my one. But it's pretty close as far as the appearance goes. I think on the aroma, there's maybe a little bit more, just a touch more of the malt character coming through on Andy's version. Not Andy's version, it's Andy's beer. Yeah, I feel like I can just pick up a little bit more on that kind of like caramel note, but otherwise it's very much that same kind of pithy citrus, maybe a little bit of a herbal sort of spicy thing going on in there as well. Perhaps a little bit more lemony on this one. Does smell great as well. Taste test, this is the deal breaker. Lovely beer, a little bit more malt on the flavour as well, I think. Hop wise, I think my one is a little bit more bitter, but the flavours are really, really close, to be fair. Yeah, I think apart from the bitterness, the hop presence and the kind of flavour profile from the hops is really, really similar. I mean, to the point where I think if you were doing it blind, you'd probably struggle to pick them apart from that aspect of it. Does seem to be a little bit more malt presence in this one. To be fair, looking at the kind of colour difference as well, maybe that's not surprising, or that might be just a sort of psychological thing that I'm seeing that colour difference and thinking there must be more malt flavour in it as well. But it's really close. I've talked many times about how difficult it is to clone a beer, and how, you know, you shouldn't be upset if it's not that similar, because it's always going to be difficult when you're using different equipment and so on and so forth, and all of the different variables that go into it. But for a first attempt, I'm pretty chuffed with how close I've managed to get this. And I have actually sent a bottle of this to the man himself, Andy, who gave me some very positive feedback on that, as far as how close it was to the original as well. So it's not just me blowing my own trumpet. Andy said that it was a really decent attempt at it too. So thanks to Andy for that feedback, and thank you for sharing an absolute fantastic recipe out there for the homebrew community. Like I said, I suggest you all give this a go. It's a really good beer. I wish I'd had this on for the summer months. It's a little bit cold at the moment to be drinking this out in the garage, but I will rebrew this for the summer to have it on the hand pull 100%, because it seems like a pretty consistent and solid recipe, and one that I will definitely come back to. So yeah, cheers again. Thanks, Andy. Get over to his channel and get over to his web shop as well and buy some of this beer, for yourself. Try it out. I would brew it regardless anyway, even if you don't want to go and buy the beer. But yeah, thank you, and go and check out Four Priest Brewery. Cheers, guys.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me, you know? That, or his dudeness, or duder, or, you know, El Duderino, if you're not into the whole brevity thing.